Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. On today's episode of me talking about 7 things, I'm going to be going over Clash of the Survivalists. Now, before I continue, please check out the links in the description below. I highly recommend checking out the surveys if you have not checked them out already. Now, on to the episode. We meet Tyler and Allie, and they are tasked with surviving 21 days in Zambia. This is another hour-long episode, and the previews of this episode showed some bickering between the two survivalists, so I don't think that this is going to be the best partnership we've seen on the show, unfortunately. But there have been a few fans who have been saying how there's too much camaraderie between the survivalists and they would like some drama, and it seems those fans are getting their wish this episode. And Tyler is a tree climber who loves practicing survival techniques, and his starting PSR is a 6.3. His survival item is a bow. Allie is a wilderness instructor who loves nature and taking people on wilderness expeditions, and her starting PSR is a 6.7. And she also brought a custom-made knife. And as per usual, they are both given a pot and fire starter. They check their map and head to water. There are 2 water spots, and they decide to go to the closest one first, and that one is 4 miles away. While trekking, Allie is worried that Tyler is telling her what to do too much because he's saying we should maybe take this path, we should maybe take that path, and she doesn't want an alpha bro, and her boyfriend says that, oh, he hopes she gets an alpha bro, and Tyler's like, I'm an alpha bro, and it's interesting to hear alpha so much at the beginning of the episode. But anyway, there are also some storm clouds rolling in, and they can hear thunder. They make it to the water as it starts to rain and decide to build a shelter under a rock ledge to protect them from the rain. And it is a little chaotic with the shelter building, getting a fire, getting the firewood, the rain, the thunder, all that. It's just very chaotic for that little bit of time. And Tyler ends up getting a fire going, which helps solve a few of their problems, and his PSR goes from 6.3 to 6.4. That night, the rain stops, but it gets windy, and Allie is coughing from the smoke inhalation, and it seems that she has gotten monoxide poisoning, and she loses her lunch, and her PSR drops from 6.7 to 6.6, but she starts feeling better after she loses her lunch. Day 2, and Allie says they're moving the fire away from underneath the rock ledge so they don't inhale as much smoke, and Allie wants to get firewood while Tyler wants to go forage for food, and Allie is a little bit irritated by this because she thought that they were both on the same page with gathering firewood, and Tyler spots some cucumbers. I don't know how to pronounce the name. It's spelled Zeyher''S, those types of cucumbers, and he picks a bunch but doesn't really know what they are. And Allie says that they shouldn't eat them because they're really bitter, and there's a note to the audience that says that the cucumbers contain a poison that is toxic to humans. Tyler's PSR drops from 6.4 to 6.3. That night, the two have a few fires, and they hear a cracking noise, and Allie says it's because in the rock ledge there's some water inside, and it's expanding, and it's causing the rock to crack, and if it gets too warm, then the rock can shatter and send shrapnel every which way, and she's really worried about it. But Tyler isn't as worried about it, and the two start to bicker over the severity of the situation, and Tyler has a more laid-back approach, and he's like, it'll be fine, and Allie's like, no, I'm a little worried about this. I don't want to get hurt from an exploding rock, potentially, because of the heat and the water and the rock and all the craziness. And they move the fire from underneath the rock ledge and have it more out in the open. Day 3, and the two are very irritated with each other, and they just don't seem to mesh well. And the two discuss moving to a new spot and begin heading to the second water source 5 miles away. And they wanted to make this move because they didn't want to have to go further and further away for firewood, and because they were kind of on a slope, it would be difficult to build anything there. So that's the main reasons why they moved. And they begin bickering on the hike because Tyler is talking about being light-footed and where to step and which way to go through the vegetation, and Allie is getting a little bit fed up because she talks about she has led wilderness expeditions, and Tyler's saying, well, you're complaining about your feet so much, I'm just trying to find the best way for you to go. And it's just back and forth, back and forth. Again, not the worst arguments we've heard, but just a lot of bickering. They don't mesh well. And they get to the new water source and start looking for a spot to set up their shelter, and Tyler is worried about setting up the shelter near a game trail, and then he points to a new spot, but then Allie points out there are elephant prints nearby, and Tyler's saying how, oh, yeah, there's elephants here, it's Africa. And she's saying, well, you say don't put it on a game trail, but there's game trails everywhere. So they continue to bicker about it. And Tyler just says he wants to leave. And then we see a commercial break, and then we come back. And there may be more going on to what is being shown, but Tyler has mentioned online that he has no ill will towards Allie, but the bickering was kind of the last straw for him, and he decides to leave the challenge, and his PSR goes from 6.3 to 5.1, and this is the second tap out of this season. Allie works on a boma and starts a fire to protect her from the animals, and her PSR goes from a 6.6 to a 6.7. Night 3, and there are elephants around Allie's camp. Day 4, and Allie talks about her first night alone. Day 6, and Allie works on making her own fishing pole. Day 8, and Allie works on making a hook for said fishing pole, and her PSR goes from 6.7 to 6.8. And unfortunately, the hook she makes ends up breaking, and then she decides to shoot an arrow at a duck that's across the water source, and she's using Tyler's bow and arrows that he left behind after he left the challenge, and she unfortunately misses the duck and it gets away. And night 10, Allie mentions hearing lions. Day 11, Allie talks more about hearing the lions. Night 15, Allie mentions hearing a hyena near the boma. Night 16, we hear more animal noises. Day 17, Allie is dizzy from hunger and goes foraging for food, and luckily finds some monkey finger fruits, and her PSR goes from 6.8 to 6.9. Day 20, and there are storm clouds. It begins storming, and Allie's PSR rises to 7.0 as she's able to maintain her fire. It storms well into the night, and Allie is worried about not having enough firewood, and she really wants to get some sleep, but she is later unfortunately stung by a scorpion. And then during the survival kit segment, we hear more about Allie's motivations. We come back from a commercial break, and Allie is fine after her scorpion sting. We see a bandage on her finger, and everything seems to be fine. And she then hikes the 3 miles to Extraction and completes the challenge. She lost 10 pounds, and her PSR goes from 6.7 to 7.2, and she spent 18 days alone. Now, it's interesting because on the Everglades Thirst Trap episode with Danny and Bob, after Bob tapped seemingly on day 3, even though the narrator says he taps on day 2, Danny's able to get Kyle as her partner on her day 5, and he was able to be with her for those 17 days before they both left together, but Allie was by herself on day 3 but never got another partner. And so she was just by herself, and maybe they didn't have another alternate available to replace Tyler, but Allie did well by herself, although we didn't see much of what happened after Tyler left. They kind of fast-forwarded through the rest of the challenge to get to day 21. And according to one of Tyler's posts he made on Facebook, he posted on a few of the Naked and Afraid fan pages, but he talks about how his recently deceased father, my condolences to him and his family, was brought up a lot in conversation, and that kind of rubbed him the wrong way. And he said he was asked if a monkey reminded him of his deceased father. There were just some questions that didn't sit right with him, where they were apparently asking him about his deceased father. So that's very sad to hear. And I can see why he left if those were the kinds of questions that were asked. And remember not to send hate to any of the survivalists. Please support your favorites. And Tyler also said that the reason why he brought up being the boss, or show his partner who's boss or something like that, was because he was asked what would he do if his partner was a bully or something like that. So it does seem that there was some stuff going on behind the scenes that didn't sit well with Tyler, and that plus the bickering with Allie and some other circumstances caused him to leave. But again, please don't send hate. Support your favorites. The survivalists don't sign up for all these hate messages or for people to be extremely mean to them, because if you get hundreds of people saying incredibly negative things towards you, that's not really gonna be good for your mental health. And what's someone supposed to do with that? They're not gonna immediately change and be a completely different person because you yelled at them or said mean things to them. So please be nice. And with that, again, don't send hateful or negative messages to the survivalists. Support your faves. Next, we have in the Highlands. Haunted by their previous tap-outs, 2 survivalists seek redemption in Thailand's steep highland jungle. But relentless monsoon rains, lack of fire, and the threat of trenchfoot threaten to end their 21 days early once again. Thank you all so much for listening. Please like, comment nice things, and subscribe, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye bye.